Hello everybody, welcome to this week's episode of Mustard Seed Leadership Podcast. We are looking at a series with a long title called From a Hierarchical Leadership Mindset to a Servant-Based Leadership Mindset. This is part 5 of the series. And just as a recap, even though we've been adding to this definition week by week, what do we mean by a hierarchical-based leadership mindset? It means a mindset that exalts a leader above the people. That's the key thought right here. When a leader sees themselves as more valuable as above the people, it's positioned at the top of a leadership pyramid. So if you think of a hierarchy and you think of a pyramid, the leader sees themselves like a king at the top of that pyramid. It's a mindset of people serving the leader. The leader expects people to serve them. It draws its authority from a title or position. These kind of leaders will be strong on positions, titles, privileges to exert that authority over people. And it uses authority to control people. Remember, God actually gives authority for us to lift people and empower them. But a hierarchical type of leadership mindset uses that authority to control people and keep them down. A servant-based leadership mindset is the belief that we are all equal before God. Jesus paid the same price for all of us. His blood shed on the cross, equal value before God. It's positioned at the front of a leadership arrow. So instead of seeing a hierarchy like this, we're seeing an arrow moving forward and the leader's at the front, setting an example. It's a mindset of the leader serving the people. It draws its authority from respect, coming from example, character, and vision, and it uses authority to lift, to empower people, and not to control them. Why is it so important? Well, the growth statement I want to focus on this week is transitioning from raising servants to raising leaders. And so then the question is, why is raising leaders so important? And I think it's critical, and one of the verses that I read often, and it saddens me every time I read it, comes from Ezekiel 22 and verse 30, where God says, God speaking, looked for someone among them who would build up the wall and stand before me in the gap on behalf of the land so that I would not have to destroy it, but I found no one. God is looking for leaders. He's looking for men and women to stand in the gap, men and women to build up the kingdom. And that's why we have a responsibility, leaders, to be raising other leaders around us continuously. Now, what I want to show you is hierarchical leadership mindset raises servants. It takes a servant-based leadership to raise up leaders. It almost sounds paradoxical, contradictory, but actually that's the beauty of the kingdom of God. So, I believe that God is continually looking for leaders who will build up the kingdom and stand in the gap. And so leaders, we have the responsibility. So, a couple of the growth statements that we've gone through so far. Number 1, from lording it over to going before. From people serving the leader to the leader serving the people. From positional power to respect-based influence. From using authority to control to using authority to empower. And then this week's statement, from raising servants to raising leaders. Now, to raise servants means developing the people around you so that they learn to think and act like leaders and not just as servants. Not just doing what you tell them to. Now, you might think, I'd love a team of people who just do what they tell you, you tell them to do. But actually, long term, that's not going to produce the growth and the multiplication that you're needing. Servants are there simply to do and not to think. Servants don't make decisions, they obey instructions. Servants exist for your benefit and not their growth. And that's so different to what we mean by raising up leaders. Raising leaders is a completely different mindset. To raise a leader means to get them to think like a leader. And that's your challenge. If you want to raise leaders, you have to teach them to think like leaders. And if you're always telling them what to do, they're never going to learn to think as leaders think. To raise a leader means to train them to make wise decisions. So leader, if you're always making all the decisions, how are they going to learn to make wise decisions? Because you're making all the decisions. To raise a leader means you are focused on their growth and not just your benefit. Now, typically, hierarchical leaders are threatened by other leaders. Remember, this is a leadership model of control, and so they're threatened by other leaders rising up around them who might challenge them for position, title, or privilege, and so intentionally want to develop servants to serve them rather than leaders around them. Servant-hearted leaders are secure because their leadership influence is not based on control. Remember, it comes from their example, from respect. So titles are privileges, and so intentionally they want to develop servants and not other leaders. Now, I want you to take note of just a beautiful example of Moses, as Moses was raising Joshua, not just to be a servant, but Moses was raising Joshua to be the next leader. And here's an example in Exodus chapter 17, verses 8 and 9. It says, the Amalekites came and attacked the Israelites at Rephidim. Moses said to Joshua, choose some of our men and go out to fight the Amalekites. Tomorrow I'll stand on top of the hill with the staff of God in my hand. I love that. Notice a couple of things. Moses left the selecting of the team of soldiers to Joshua. Joshua, you choose the soldiers. How many, which, that's up to you. You choose. Moses entrusted the physical battle to Joshua to lead. Joshua, you take the army. You fight the battle. And then Moses gave responsibility for the battle to Joshua, but took final responsibility by standing in prayer and overseeing the battle from the top of the mountain. I love that. I think Moses could look down on Joshua. I don't think Joshua could see Moses, but Moses was there, teaching him and training him. It's little wonder that Joshua was ready when the time came for him not just to take over Moses' leadership role, but also to lead Israel into victory in their military campaign. So, to raise leaders and not just servants means there must be decisions that others under your leadership are allowed to make. If you make all the decisions, they're never going to raise leaders who can make decisions. There must be room for those under your leadership to learn, experiment, and develop without you being directly involved. If you're handling everything, they're never going to grow. And there must be real responsibility and authority given to them with real consequences. If they never get to carry real responsibility with real consequences, they'll never develop the muscle to carry it. Just pondering it, I thought back on how this was outworked in my life many years back. About 17 years ago, started doing my first trips into other nations to preach the gospel. And I went along with one of the members of our NCMI apostolic team just to their support, carry a suitcase. And I would sit in on the leadership training times with other pastors, going off to other churches. And I was happy to support. But pretty soon he gave me opportunities to take a few sessions with the pastors and go along to different churches. And then one day he said, hey, Brent, here's an opportunity. I want you to go and preach at this particular church. We were in Sao Paulo in Brazil. And I remember being picked up in a taxi, and the taxi took me for an hour. I didn't even know where we're going. I didn't know if I had to pay for the taxi. I didn't know anything. I was terrified. It turned out to be a big church. It was a very stretching experience, but I came back from that with experience. And I'm so grateful now looking back that I had the privilege of being under someone's leadership who didn't want to keep me as a servant, but wanted to raise me as a leader. So let me leave you with these quick questions. Question number 1, evaluate your leadership style for a moment and ask yourself whether you make all or most of the decisions, or do you encourage your team to think and make decisions? Do you give your team room to grow, or do you micromanage and smother them by being too hands-on? And do you let your team experience the consequences, good or bad, of the responsibility they carry, or do you keep shielding them from consequences? So there it is, from raising servants to raising leaders. Hierarchical leaders want to develop servants who benefit them. Servant-based leaders want to raise leaders who will benefit the church or organization. Are you willing to change your mindset and surround yourself with growing leaders? Hope it helps. Hope to see you again next week. May the Lord bless you, and bye for now.
Thank you for listening to this week's episode. Remember, if you'd like the notes that come along with this episode or any one of our past episodes, you can visit outlookchurch.co.za/mustardseed leadership, where you can see all our past episodes, all the resources and notes that go along with this. Until next time, keep growing.